મોંઘવારીથી પીડાતી જનતા પર વધુ એક ફટકા સમાન સમાચાર મળી રહ્યા છે। આરબીઆઈ દ્વારા રેપો રેટમાં વધારો કરવામાં આવ્યો છે। જી હા, વધારા સાથે હોમ લોન અને અન્ય લોન પણ મોંઘી થવાની શક્યતાઓ છે।
Depreciation of their currencies. Global stagflation concerns are growing and are amplifying the volatility in global financial markets. This is feeding back into the real economy and further clouding the overall outlook. The MPC noted that in such challenging global environment, domestic economic activity is gaining traction, while inflation pressures have intensified further. The upside risks to inflation, as highlighted in the April and May 2022 policies of the MPC, have materialized earlier than anticipated, both in terms of timing and magnitude. Inflationary pressures have become broad-based and remain largely driven by adverse supply shocks. There are growing signs of a higher pass-through of input costs to selling prices. The MPC noted that inflation is likely to remain above the upper tolerance band of 6% through the first 3 quarters of the current financial year, that is 22-23. In this context, supply-side measures taken by the government in reducing excise duties on petrol and diesel, along with other measures, would help in mitigating the inflationary pressures to some extent. The MPC also recognized that sustained high inflation could unhinge inflation expectations and trigger second-round effects. The MPC therefore judged that further monetary policy measures are necessary to anchor the inflation expectations. Accordingly, the MPC decided to increase the policy repo rate by 50 basis points to 4.9%. The MPC also decided to remain focused on withdrawal of accommodation to ensure that inflation remains within the target going forward while supporting growth. It may be noted in this context that the repo rate still remains below its pre-pandemic level. I would now like to provide an assessment, a more detailed assessment of growth and inflation. And first, I would like to take up growth. According to the provisional estimates released by the National Statistical Office, that is NSO, on May 31st, India's gross domestic product, that is GDP growth, in 21-22 is estimated at 8.7%. This level of real GDP in 21-22 has exceeded the pre-pandemic, that is the 2019-20 level. On the supply side, major categories also surpassed the 2019-20 level. Available information for April and May indicates that the recovery in domestic economic activity remains firm, with growth impulses getting increasingly broad-based. Manufacturing and services purchasing managers indices, that is the PMI, for May point towards further expansion of activity. This is also corroborated by movements in railway freight and port traffic, domestic air traffic, GST collections, steel consumption, cement production, and bank credit. While urban demand is recovering, rural demand is gradually improving. The contact-intensive services related to trade, hotels, and transport have recovered in Q4 of 21-22. Going by the early results of our surveys, capacity utilization in the manufacturing sector increased further to 74.5% in the fourth quarter of 21-22 from 72.4% in Q3 of 21-22. So that is in the last financial year, 21-22, between Q3 and Q4, the capacity utilization in the manufacturing sector increased from 72.4 to 74.5%. Capacity utilization is also likely to increase further in the current financial year. Investment activity is thus expected to strengthen, driven by rising capacity utilization, government's capital expenditure, and deleveraged corporate balance sheets. Improvement in investment activity is also reflected in pickup in demand for bank credit and persisting growth in imports of capital goods. Merchandise exports have remained buoyant with double-digit growth for the 15th successive month in May this year, while high growth of non-oil, non-gold imports